Hey everyone, welcome to Hit the Apex podcast. It's Jawad here. Thank you for tuning in. This is the midterm report card, mid-season special, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the mid-season break, it is actually race week this week. Just so you know, or you might have heard somewhere, F1 is back this weekend at the Belgian Grand Prix, which I'm sure a lot of people are excited for. I'm excited for too. You know, it's nice having a break in between, and obviously, as you know, there's been a lot going on in my world as well. So it was nice to have that kind of break from racing and from F1 in particular, not having to do any of this stuff. So it's nice to just come back, and I said, oh yeah, you know, it's probably worth doing one of these mid-season reports, and you know, it'll kind of tie into Belgium as well coming up this weekend. So that's what I do, that's what I'm going to do. And the way it's set up, as I usually do, I've got some notes written down, mainly just going through the field in tiers, so you know, kind of split them between, you know, the title fight, you know, who's in third place, midfield battles, who's at the back, and all that kind of thing. So not going to be running through each team's results with a fine-tooth comb, but you know, just having a casual chat as I do about some of the highlights and lowlights of each team, in as much detail as I feel like. You know, I'm not going to add anything which I don't feel like it's already been. If I feel like it's already been said a million times, I might for certain things. Now I'm waffling again. See, this is what happens when you don't do this for a few weeks, as you kind of lose your rhythm and begin to waffle. Without further ado, though, let's kind of start from the back rather than from the front. And I've got this titled as the cellar dwellers, and that's kind of what they are at the moment this year. Three teams kind of at the back of the field on a consistent basis. Disappointingly, though, one of them is AlphaTauri, who sit 7 points behind the Haas team, and Haas we'll talk about a bit after. But you know, given the fact that this is a team that has punched above its weight and done quite well over the past few years. They had that win with Pierre Gasly in 2020, and then of course another podium last year in Baku with Gasly again. They came into this season with the same lineup, and we expected Gasly to keep on going strength to strength and possibly even knock on the door of a big team, which, you know, we found out that he's going to be staying put at AlphaTauri for next season. Yuki Tsunoda, improvements, yes, on his first season, but it's more so the car this year that's kind of let both of them down. Both have only had 3 top 10 finishes each, so that's, you know, 6 times that they've scored as a team as well. That's why they're so far down. When you look at the team behind them, Aston Martin, they're 7 points away, as well as, you know, 7 points behind the Haas team, who in my eyes have been one of the improvements of the year. Where does it go from here for AlphaTauri? You know, they're just going to have to start scoring points. I don't know if they've got upgrades coming and anything like that, but, you know, we know that Gasly is better than this. Tsunoda, he's shown signs of improvement, but, you know, still there's some inconsistencies, and it's overall just sad to see that, you know, if Gasly is staying there for another season, the decline in performance. So you'd hope that they get things together for next season, struggling to adapt to the rules for 2022. Aston Martin, though, I've kind of given them a lot of grief already this season, and, you know, it's not going to stop me from giving them more. But the fact that, you know, they've failed to make that step up this season with the new regulations, I know a lot of the infrastructure that they're building and working on back at their Silverstone base won't be online just yet, but given the added investment and, you know, all that sort of stuff, the new personnel that they've brought in, like some Mike Crack, team principal, they've got Martin Whitmarsh there too. They really haven't made any progress from last year. You know, they came in, they had this car concept that was quite radical. The car looked quite cool. It didn't work for them, but then they changed that concept to what Red Bull have more so in Barcelona, and really that's given him some points finishes. Sebastian Vettel has been great. He had his personal best, finishes 6th in Baku. He's always quite handy in Baku. Lance Stroll, uninspiring as ever. He's only had 10th place finishes so far this season, 4 of them in fact. And yeah, it's just going to be an interesting one because that team's going to go through a big change for next year with Fernando Alonso coming on board, Sebastian Vettel announcing his retirement too. And with the way that things are going, it's going to be almost like a soft exit for Vettel, given the fact that, he's a driver who's achieved so much in his career, and, for his F1 career to come to a close on a whimper, maybe finish for some points, who knows. But they're a team that I don't think that are going to move forwards as much for the rest of the year. AlphaTauri have more of a chance, given that they've got a driver of Gasly's caliber, and Tsunoda as well on his day is strong. We've seen him at the end of last year, Abu Dhabi, getting a career best finish. I think he was 4th or 5th he got in that race. So it's definitely not out of the question that those guys might move forward, but not Aston Martin. I think Williams as well, not really making much of a step up this year. They're still very much the team in last place. They're 17 points behind Aston Martin at the moment, and they're only have points on the board courtesy of some excellent drives from Alex Albon early in the season. That Australian Grand Prix where he went to pretty much the final lap of the race on one set of tyres and changed. We were all concerned whether they had forgotten the rules, that they actually had to make a pit stop, but they did. Got them 10th in the end, and again in Miami for 9th, so good job from those guys. Nicholas Latifi, unfortunately, the drum's beating on his career. He's struggling in the 2022 spec car, too many mistakes, just can't seem to get it right. He was fastest in practice, though, in Hungary in the wet, so, that's one highlight everyone can get behind for the GOAT in Nicholas Latifi. But with all the stuff going on about Oscar Piastri and everything, I still think Latifi will be replaced for next year, most likely. Williams looking at F2, frontrunner Logan Sargent. That would be a good call-up alongside Albon. And Albon, of course, being confirmed as well on a multi-year deal for Williams, so a bit of consistency there for them. But yeah, when you look at this part of the field, you don't expect... This year, really, I didn't expect any of them to be down there, even though someone's got to be in last, in the bottom places. But I did expect more from all three of these teams, so it is a bit disappointing to see them where they are. Ahead of them, though, like I said, Haas and also Alfa Romeo, two of the big improvers on last season in particular. When you look at both their seasons, Haas were basically just, you had Nikita Mazepin. What do you expect when you got him on the team? They didn't have any upgrades. They basically raced the same spec car that they did the year before in 2020, so, not much to be expected from them. But Alfa Romeo, I think the arrival of Valtteri Bottas has really rejuvenated them. He's in the top 10 at the moment in the Drivers' Championship too. Guan Yu Zhou, the rookie, points for him on debut. He scored some more points since then, and I think, perhaps one of the more underrated drivers this season. I think, a lot of us were quite critical of Zhou coming into this season because he had gotten that seat on the F1 grid ahead of Piastri, who was the F2 champion last year. But he's come in, he's done a solid job. I think more so he's been plagued by car unreliability. He also had that big shunt in Silverstone as well, which, caused headlines and everything, and it was so good to see him walk away from that. And there's been some changes to the cars for next year that has been announced in terms of the roll hoop and everything as well, as a result of the FIA's reaction to that crash, so it was good to see him walk away from that. But yeah, I think once the consistency in the car comes together, we could see him consistently get some results. And that's the thing, Zhou, he might not be the most amazing driver. He's very much like a Nicholas Latifi in my eyes, but when they can get the car on the right spot, there's no saying that they can't get results. We saw Latifi go on a little run last year, get some points, and it was like, oh yeah, we might have to give him a chance for 2022. So I think, from his driving ability and his, where he's at the moment, he has not done very much wrong at the moment. If he goes and has a year like Latifi has had this year, where it's pretty much all the driver's fault, then, we can very much say that he is not going to be sticking around a lot longer. But good to see Bottas, though, doing what he's doing. He's been getting the car into Q3, scoring points on a regular basis. It's probably not been a consistent run for him in the last few races, really, since Silverstone, where he had the DNF. But, he's been up there. Fifth was his best finish in Imola as well in the wet conditions. So I think, it's good to see him rejuvenate the Alfa Romeo team. Of course, news about Alfa, or rumours about Alfa and their future, they could be becoming the Audi factory team in 2026. So depending on if Bottas is sticking around that long or not, I think, he's put the team in a good place. And, if they do get that factory support and turn into that factory team, we know Bottas is the kind of driver that can be at the front again. Whether he can sustain the pressure for a title fight or whatever later on in his career, who knows. He won't have Lewis Hamilton as a teammate, that's for sure. Whereas we come to Haas, and, Haas made a hot start this year. Kevin Magnussen, who was brought back into the car, of course, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and Haas wanting to sever any ties with Mazepin and his family, so they're out of the picture. And I think bringing Magnussen back into the fold was the best thing that they could do. He's been solid, fifth on his return in Bahrain, which is probably Haas's best result in a couple of years now as well. But you got to say that, again, their lack of upgrades is hurting them. There's a spell in the middle of the first half of the season where, there was a few DNFs. It was finishing at the back of the grid. But again, he's been quite good with picking up those points and quite handy in the sprint races as well. He's been able to score points in both the sprints so far this season. Though big questions about Mick Schumacher. Of course, we've seen him in his previous seasons in previous categories where he comes into his second year, he's a lot stronger than in the first. And that's kind of not what's happened so far this season. He's been hit hard by DNFs and crashes of his own causing. There was a crash in Miami where he hit his mentor and friend in Sebastian Vettel, so that wasn't a very good look for him. Crashed the car in qualifying in Saudi as well, so he didn't even race there. But it took him till about Silverstone to score some points, and he scored points again in Austria with a 6th place finish. And it was nice, that Austrian Grand Prix. I think it's been his race, his best weekend so far in Formula One, where he was actually able to go toe-to-toe with Lewis Hamilton. I think he was either in the Grand Prix or the sprint. He was a bit disappointed not to make it into the points, into the top 8 for the sprint, but was in the top 10 for the race. But yeah, still a bit of question marks around his future, whether he's going to stay at Haas, whether he's going to move on elsewhere. I don't think there's much room on the grid when you look. There was the seat at Aston Martin if he was keen, but if I was Mick, I would stay at Haas, given the fact that, he is a Ferrari young driver, and Ferrari have the option over the second seat at Haas. Like, even though they've announced Antonio Giovinazzi as their reserve driver, or the driver that's going to do some FP1s for them later this year, I don't think I'd want to put Giovinazzi in the car over a Schumacher. So, it would be a shame if Mick was to miss out on a seat. But yeah, good job from those guys to be sitting where they are at the moment in the standings. That's 7th to be exact, and then Alfa Romeo, of course, a bit ahead of them in 6th. So that's a big improvement on where they were last year. Ahead of those guys, we've got Alpine and McLaren. So Mick Alpine, I've titled this one. They've pretty much locked in a battle for 4th in the Constructors' Championship, with which Alpine is leading at the moment by 4 points. Alpine have really made a step forward this year. You can see they've been strong with their race pace as well. Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso doing a good job. Alonso early on in the season had some problems, driver error, unreliability, whatever you want to say. There will always be the call of whether in Australia he could have qualified on the front row and had the race pace to finish on the podium or whatever. It's all good and well in hindsight. But then on the other side of things, McLaren have dropped the ball with their 22 car. So they've had problems since the second test at Bahrain with their brakes. It saw a dismal start to their season. They didn't score points on debut. They were nowhere near the top 10. They were so far behind. It was like watching a McLaren Honda go around, to be honest, and luckily that was not the case. But Lando Norris, again, has been doing what he can to move the team forward. He got the surprise podium as well in Imola, and he's sitting 7th in the standings at the moment, and ahead of him is all the top 3 teams drivers, so Hamilton, Sainz and Russell and all that. So to be sitting ahead of the likes of Ocon, and Alonso, who are in the faster car at the moment, is such a testament to Lando and his efforts as well. So, and the fact that we see Lando mixing it with those top 3 teams sometimes in qualifying and even getting ahead of them, like we saw in Hungary, 4th or whatever he qualified in the wet, that was such a great performance. Yet on the other side of the garage, Daniel Ricciardo, oh boy. I really feel that the writing is on the wall for Dan, unfortunately. He's only had a best of 6 this season, which was in his home race in Australia. He's sitting 12th in the standings. He hasn't really featured as much in the points. He got points there in Austria and in France, which was 9th in both races, but he just can't seem to qualify, get any pace out of the car in qualifying. And then in the race, we saw him in Hungary putting on some moves or whatever, but then came together with Stroll, and that pretty much was his race over. So, what's going to happen there? And we know that Piastri at the moment, Oscar Piastri, is involved in some legal issues with Alpine. The fact that the silly season was triggered by Vettel's retirement, and Alonso announcing he's going to Aston Martin, and then Alpine saying Oscar Piastri is going to be in our car next year, and Piastri's like, no, you didn't have my consent when you made that announcement, and no, I won't be driving one of your cars next year, which makes you believe that Piastri is off to McLaren to replace Ricciardo. So what's going to happen there? Which we haven't heard much through the break. I'm sure it'll rev back into gear this weekend with what's going on and everything. What do I believe? I mean, just for the sake of not losing Ricciardo off the grid, hopefully he gets a Hail Mary from Alpine and ends up going back there, which again makes you question why he left Renault in the first place. Did he not believe that they could be better than McLaren? I mean, I said this in a piece that I was writing yesterday, that I'm starting to see shades of Fernando Alonso in Ricciardo and in his decision making when it comes to his career, because he made the call to leave Red Bull at the end of 2018. He went over to Renault thinking that he can turn this team around and they'll be fighting Red Bull and everything, which didn't happen at all. And then only a season into his Renault deal did he decide that I'm going to make the switch to McLaren after Carlos Sainz was going over to Ferrari. So, you've got to question what he's thinking, what the motivation is. I know he wants to win and all that sort of stuff, but at the same time, something's got to give. And this is not me completely having a go at Ricciardo, because I'm a big fan and everything. McLaren have certainly dropped the ball with the car this year as well. They haven't had a stronger car as they have in previous seasons, where Carlos Sainz and Norris were able to go in and finish third in the constructors. And again, last year, Lando putting in those performances, Ricciardo getting the win. They missed out on third because one driver couldn't do as good as the other. So this year, if they finish 5th, that's definitely going behind, and you can't say that it's all on the car. So it's an interesting one, and for McLaren too, we know that 2024 is kind of the year that they expect to be a bit more competitive or be closer to the front running teams because they get their new facilities online, the new wind tunnel and all. So they're kind of playing a long game with that. And perhaps signing a driver like Piastri is going to be good for the future, securing their future because they've got Norris there on a long-term deal. They can have a young driver like Piastri. If he sinks or swim in F1, that's another question because, why he wouldn't stick it out with Alpine, the team that spent a lot of money in nurturing him and giving him all this testing this year as well. It's kind of difficult, but then again, that's what the contract said. He was supposed to. They had an option to, what do you call it? They had an option to exercise, but the time expired or whatever, and that's when Alonso announced what he was going to do. So it's all a bit unfortunate for Alpine. They're the ones who look like the losers in this situation. So that's a bit sad. But if they do finish fourth in the constructors, that's definitely not something that you can call them losers over, because I think on track that they've had a really good year. McLaren, yeah, again, they just need to improve, and whether Ricciardo can turn his form around as well heading into the back half of the year. Some good races coming up where he has done pretty strong in the past. He's won at Spa, he's won at Monza. They're two good races for him. Just have to see. And Monza, again, a track that might suit the McLaren this year, so we should hopefully see him a bit more competitive when we get there in a few weeks' time. Ahead of those guys, we've got Mercedes in third, and really I should put them in with Ferrari and with Red Bull, because they have been up there, not quite as good as the Red Bulls, of course, and Ferrari in terms of qualifying speed, but they've just shown why they're such a good team, why they are 8-time world champions. They've stuck to their guns with the zero side pods concept or whatever. They've suffered greatly with the porpoising and the bouncing, the problems that have come as a result of these ground effect cars. But when you look at their results, it doesn't seem like that they've had problems as such. Lewis Hamilton, he's got 5 straight podiums at the moment. The last 2 races, both Mercedes have finished on the podium, so 2-3 finishes for Hamilton and for Russell as well, who Russell, let's not forget, it's his first season with Mercedes. Bar Silverstone, he hasn't finished lower than 5th. He's been getting more out of the car than Hamilton at times as well, especially in that early part of the season where we saw him have that run of top 5 finishes, which is so great, and getting that podium in Australia as well. He was on top of Hamilton all weekend. And yeah, what is it? Could you say that call for a change of mindset that I talked about earlier in the year? I said Mercedes, they're not going to be fighting for the World Championship this year. It's going to be about maximising the result in the Constructors' Championship. And, for a driver of Hamilton's calibre as well, who's been in the title fight for many years now, it's going to be more about supporting the team and getting the best result for the team. I still stand by the fact that we might not see Hamilton win another title in F1, but he's still very much a race-winning driver. I think one of those 2 Mercedes cars, and I think Hamilton more so than Russell, might win a race in this back half of the season. It's yet to be seen, and the fact that they're so close to second in the Constructors' Championship as well, 30 points behind to be precise, I really think that they can overhaul Ferrari, given how Ferrari just seems to be lacking that operational sharpness, which a team like Mercedes, who they're so modern, they're so slick, they're so well organised. They don't have the fastest car, but they can still get these results. A lot of people might dislike them, but this is what I admire about them, is how good that they really are. Even if it means that the FIA are going to change scrutineering around flaws heading into the Belgian Grand Prix, which might affect Ferrari and Red Bull a lot more. But Mercedes, they're clever operators, so got to give them that. And yeah, good to see the way that both the drivers are working together as well. Russell and Hamilton, they've got their own strengths and their own weaknesses, but overall, I think they're doing a good job together. Might be a different story if they were fighting for the championship, and then I'm pretty sure we'll see Hamilton at his full ruthlessness. But for what it is at the moment, they're doing an amazing job. And then ahead of them, Max has been supreme, taking it to the Supermax, basically, and Ferrari have blown it, basically. So all the superlatives in the world can be used to describe the season that Max has had so far. Like, I was writing about this earlier today, ahead of the season resuming there in Belgium, and basically saying what I see this year from Max, take aside the fact that, he feels that they're still not perfect. They still don't have the best car. He doesn't care about the lead that he has in the championship. He just wants the car to be perfect every weekend. And yes, they've got some problems with the car being overweight and they're not as quick in qualifying as a Ferrari. But he's 80 points ahead of Charles Leclerc at the moment. 8 wins to his name. It is reminding me a lot of Sebastian Vettel when he was at Red Bull, particularly the 2011 season where, after the Hungarian Grand Prix, when they went into the mid-season break, Vettel was 85 points clear of his teammate Mark Webber at the time. And the kind of drives that Verstappen has had, such as, Miami, Imola, Hungary, France as well, is showing how ruthless he is. Hungary, that could be the drive of the season for Verstappen. The fact that he started 10th, with a power unit problem, of course, in qualifying that, prevented him from doing any better in Q3, to then basically just under the radar make his way up through the field to finish and win the race. It's so uncanny, and given the fact that I think all the different things going on around him, all the errors that other teams have been making, chiefly Ferrari, like what they were doing in Hungary, no idea. Then again, we don't know what they're doing any time of the year with their strategy. It just shows how good a driver Verstappen is, how much of a step up he's taken from last year. And last year, he was locked in that intense fight with Hamilton until the final race for the championship. This year, he doesn't have that as such, but he's still wanting more. And that kind of shows that there might be no limit to what Verstappen can achieve. And that's kind of what was prophesized about Verstappen coming into F1 when he did join at such a young age. They knew the kind of talent that he had, and that, this is the kind of ruthlessness and the records that he could achieve and break and everything. Red Bull basically wanted another Sebastian Vettel after Sebastian Vettel left, and they've got it in the form of Max Verstappen. So it's really good to see in that respect that that's what's happening. He has been quite strong ever since Imola, coming out of the third race in Australia. Everyone had written him off, or some people had written him off, saying that, he can't come back after a 46-point deficit, to Leclerc. And he's just like, well, hold my Red Bull, here I come, now I'm leading by 80 points. So it's quite a stark contrast to what it was looking like earlier on in the season. But I, for one, hadn't written off Max, but more so thought that, we might see a closer fight than it has been so far. So it's been good to see him, for the Red Bull fans, for the Verstappen fans, the way he has come out. Sergio Checo Perez, good to see him a bit more settled in within the team now. He got the win in Monaco, which was quite special. Anyone who wins the Monaco Grand Prix, it's quite an achievement. I still feel like he can overhaul Leclerc for second in the championship too, so to really make it like a 2011 style season for Red Bull, where they finished 1-2 in the championship, Checo has to finish in second. He's had the rub of the green ahead of Verstappen at times this season, especially with that overweight car in qualifying. But, he has been a bit more inconsistent of late, so if he can get that consistency back in order, then I'm sure we'll see him ahead of Leclerc. There's only 5 points in it between them at the moment, so that's also quite galling when you look at that. And yeah, Ferrari, what do you say about them? I've kind of said what I needed to a lot. You know how I feel about Ferrari. And the worst part about it is, I think back to what I said a couple of years ago and saying that, we need to change our mindsets on Ferrari. We need to kind of lay off them a little bit because they've said they're going to come back in 2022. So rather than criticizing them for 2020 and for 2021 or whatever not being able to fight for the championship or for wins, we need to focus more on 2022 and what they're supposed to achieve in that season. And what have they achieved so far this season? They've had some wins. Yeah, they've had 4 wins in total. Leclerc's been on pole a whole bunch, but they just haven't got that sharpness like a Mercedes or a Red Bull. Driver errors have been left, right and centre. Reliability problems as well. And when you look at Carlos Sainz this season, it's been pretty dismal when it comes to reliability. Leclerc having DNFs in Barcelona and Baku because of reliability. Then he makes his own mistake in France. Basically did a Vettel in 2018 when he was at Hockenheim for Ferrari too. The strategic calls there in Monaco, where neither Ferrari ended up on the podium. Sorry, no, Sainz did, but Leclerc didn't end up on the podium. And then in Hungary, what were they thinking with the hard tyres? Like, they were on a completely different strategy tyre-wise to Red Bull and Verstappen. So why crumble when they came in for their second stop? Why react to that to try and overcut them? It wasn't going to work. When they had the hard tyres as the only compound. They should have stuck to their guns, gone late, put on the soft tyre and see what would happen. They would have at least had a podium, possibly, rather than finishing where they did 4th and 6th for Leclerc in particular. And Leclerc taking that 3rd stop for soft tyres and didn't even end up taking the point for fastest lap. It's comical. It's a comedy of errors, basically. And I'm not the biggest Ferrari fan. I couldn't care if they won the championship or not. It's the fact that, again, they're touted as favourites. They've had this time, they've had all the resources to be able to do it, and yet they still can't get it right. All these other teams, Mercedes and Red Bull, they've been successful because they seem to know what it takes to win in this modern day and age. Whereas Ferrari, they're stuck in their past glory. They're never going to win if it's going to be like that. And I still stand by, Mattia Binotto. I don't think that there's anyone else out there who could do any better than him at the moment. So let's not all start a coup and get rid of him like I've seen some people suggest. It's more so they've got to really conduct some kind of internal review at the end of this season, or they might have already in the middle of the year to say, what do we need to do better on the pit wall? Because that's kind of what's letting us down at the moment. And for Leclerc as well, if he's the leading driver, if he wants to be champion, he's got to kind of exert that ruthlessness and that champion's persona. Like Silverstone, for example, he could have been a bit more demanding with coming in to switch to the soft tyre at the end of the race, rather than seeing his teammate get put on the soft tyre and then go on and win the Grand Prix. Like, as good as it is to see Sainz win a race, we're all big Carlos Sainz fans, from a championship perspective, it really made no sense where Leclerc finished 4th and not even on the podium and could have got more points on Verstappen that weekend than he did, and seeing his teammate go and win. So kind of disappointing in that respect, but what do you do? It's the same old story, really. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And yeah, it's really Verstappen's title to lose at this stage. Overall, then, it's been a pretty good season so far. It's the exciting. The excitement with the new regulations and the fact that, we see more wheel-to-wheel battles like we did in Silverstone and whatnot, and the cars being able to follow more closely, kind of has been masked by the fact that it's one-way traffic at the top of the championship. But it doesn't take away from the fact that, we're seeing a lot more interest and excitement with Formula One as well. There's still a lot of things that, absolutely annoy the living daylights out of me, and we see that again with the arguments between the drivers and the race directors this year. Like, at least I'll give credit to race direction and race control for the consistency on track limits and all that sort of thing. There's still some things that they got to iron out in terms of penalties and whatnot, but it has been overall quite good, which is good, given the fact, all the hoo-ha after the end of last season and everything. We didn't really want to see a repeat of that, and see them do worse than they did. But again, the divide between the FIA and Formula One as well is quite an interesting thing to keep an eye out on. Finally, were they able to confirm the 2026 engine regulations too? So we should see, hopefully, the likes of Porsche and Audi confirm their presence from then as well. Porsche looking to buy into Red Bull, 50% stake in Red Bull, and then of course Audi looking to get in with Sauber as well. So we should hopefully see that in the back half of the season. 9 races to go. Got the triple header, Spa, Zandvoort, Monza coming up, which is always great. We had Zandvoort come back last year. It wasn't the most exciting race, of course, with Max walking away with it, but it's such a great track, and the passion of the crowd. Hopefully they will behave themselves as well, as we've seen in what's been going on in recent races and stuff. And good to see the Belgian Grand Prix organisers kind of clamping down on that sort of antisocial behaviour with limiting what the fans can bring in and whatnot. And that's the thing, like, if it was here, you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't be allowed to bring in flares or bring your own alcohol and that sort of thing. So it's good to see them cracking down on that. Everyone deserves to have a good time wherever they are, if it's at a race or at a concert or any other sporting event. So let's not let, a few bad eggs ruin it for everyone. So, if they want to have fun on your own, in your own little area. Don't ruin it for the rest of us. Seeing some favourites return to the calendar too, Japan and Singapore, which obviously haven't been on the calendar since 2019 because of the pandemic. Will be good to see. Again, I always talk about how it's annoying having Japan clash with the Bathurst 1000, so that'll be one to navigate again this year, but it'll be good to see Suzuka back on the calendar, as with Singapore too. So that pretty much wraps this one up. So thank you very much for tuning in. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at @HitTheApexMedia. Media. There's also a Linktree as well with all the other links that are relevant to me and this podcast. A shout out as always to F1 Grid Talk podcast and all the people, lovely people who are on there. Looking forward to being guest on their show again at times for the rest of the season. Other than that, I'll be back next week to do the Belgian Grand Prix review and also Sandown Super Sprint, which was on last weekend too. So I didn't want to talk about that today, but I'll do that next week. Until then, take care, guys, and we'll see you then.